Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Let me just unmute us on the good old-fashioned TikTok as well. I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for joining the live. I'm here with Kay and with Zane. We're talking about Ikiru, the Akira Kurosawa film. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and jump in and chat about that. If you guys are in the chat, either on YouTube or on TikTok, feel free to join in, ask any questions. We always love to hear from you guys. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Listening to myself now. Us on.
Oh yeah, let me mute that. There we go.
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions or anything like that, and we'll be here to answer them. So yeah, Kay, you ready to kick us off?
Absolutely, I'm always ready. Let's do this. All right. Welcome, all you existential nut jobs, you philosophy majors, and you wholesome whores. Welcome back to One with the Films. We're here. It's a beautiful after morning, and I got a nice cup of water to wash away last night's sins and a coffee to prepare me for today's. And I'm your merry man who's a fan of Conan, a co-host who also despises the inefficiency of bureaucracy and loves falling asleep in parks. I am Movie K-Man the Third, and also known as K, also known as Keegan, also known as that guy people are surprised to see at parties. And with me is my melancholic menace, the man who can fill my sewage drain anytime he wants, the man who has a face for public works. He's the not so black and white, but tonally consistent neurodivergent. It's seen by NAF, or just NAF, or sexy if you want to be friends.
That is actually the best way to be friends with me. All you got to do is just compliment me one time. I'm there. As Zane put it one time wonderfully, my type is, does she breathe?
Correct. It has ruined NAF saying, oh my god, this person's attractive, and then I will just simply say, does she breathe? And like it just like Zane is giving me the cheat code to my interactions with NAF.
You broke
and
me.
It's great.
It's an upgrade from before when it used to be pulse optional.
Pulse optional.
Hey, come on, man! I'm not Johnny. Great. Johnny, if you're listening to this.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. There is a difference.
That's why I said it's an upgrade.
Yes, exactly. You're correct.
Another film which we watched and you guys can check out.
Absolutely. Gotta love those plugs. Now, but unlike me on a Friday night, we are not alone. Joining us today is the Lego Meister Lego, the king of kings. Of the three of us, he ranks well above NAF in terms of facial hair, the only person to bring us 3 films for 2 episodes. And if I had a credit for every time this man brought a film that was remade by the whites, I'd have 2 credits. And speaking of segues, it's time to give the spotlight over to his 2 credits. Please welcome my 2 credits, aka our friend Zane. Zane, say hi to the people.
Well, Kay, thank you very much for that very warm welcome. Happy to be back, boys.
Gotta have it. Absolutely happy to have you back.
Always a treat, and I'm very much looking forward to this.
And he's gunning for the one with the filmy this year. It feels like with this choice, which I can't wait to get into and discuss. And I feel like that's gotta be
for sure.
Even in like 100 hours of Star Wars content that exists, I feel like that is the most that someone has said the words "my 2 credits" in one sentence in like a 10-second span. Like
it was more. It was more before I edited it down. I thought 5, that's just crazy.
Yeah,
but nonetheless,
but yeah, you're amazing. Insane. Great intro as always, man. I'll always love to hear them. I always look forward to them as well. But a reminder to all listeners that you can find One with the Films on all your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, as well as live and on demand right here. And if you're in the live chat, please feel free to join in the conversation. So we always love to hear from you and answer any questions that may come up as you guys are watching. But if you are listening on demand as well, don't worry, we still love you. And I did learn recently that Spotify lets you comment stuff, so feel free to chat anyway, and I'll reply to you when I see it. So yeah, but Kay, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're actually doing here?
Of course,
why are we here?
do.
Why am I here at 7:21 a.m. on an Australian Sunday morning?
Well, you're here because you're a saint. But nonetheless, the weekly watch list is what happens with a bunch of friends with unique and wonderful taste in films have tried too hard for too long to finally share and discuss their favorite films with one another. And if you've been around for a while, you already know the shtick. But for the uninitiated over here, the idea is that for every episode, at least one person is watching the chosen film for the first time. It's all about having the space for creators to share the art that matters most to them. and give them a platform to show us all a little bit why. So if you like listening to a bunch of nerds geek out and force each other to watch and discuss their favorite films for the very first time, feel free to follow or subscribe. Send us to your friends because we need that interaction. And if you like, you can activate notifications so you never miss a new episode. And of course, we're on all your favorite socials too. Links are in the description below. You should check us out.
Hell yeah, baby. Hell yeah. So yeah, weekly watch list. We're hyped. It's going to be really great. But I mean, that being said, Zane, question for you. Tell me, what is a brilliant film that not enough people have seen?
It is Ikiru by Akira Kurosawa from 1952, obviously, which is why we're here.
A fantastic choice. I can't wait to get into the conversation on this one because this is a meaty boy. Like
absolutely,
it's mental. But I wanted to ask as well. Maybe if you could tell us in one sentence why you chose this film specifically.
I wanted to break you guys.
Awesome.
I suppose that's the joke tagline. But no, I think in reality, as someone who has lived through the loss of a parent, I think about death a lot. Mm-hmm. Not in a bad way, just in a reality of like, this is life and this is what happens. In a real way. Yeah. And what does life mean? And what do you do with your life? And so to me, this is a movie that I think was well ahead of its time, a deeply philosophical movie, and it really is an eye-opener. And I think that a lot of people, as you kind of go through your day-to-day, you don't really think about these things. And I think that this movie is a great movie for conversation. And it really just brings you a little bit closer together to things that you are important, that you find important in your life and maybe haven't given as much focus as you should. And you forget kind of what are the things that really matter in life. Yeah,
absolutely. And we're going to get real deep into a lot of that as well. Because I think that, you're right. This film absolutely touches on a lot of that. But Kay, I'm curious from your perspective, Mr. Film School, you hadn't seen this before. You haven't seen much Kurosawa, have you?
I hadn't, no. Kurosawa was always one of those that like really, obviously I knew about him and I knew obviously with being a Star Wars fan, it's impossible not to know that Kurosawa's influence on Star Wars. I had always been interested, but I hadn't gotten around to much. Like for a while, I hadn't even seen Seventh Samurai until I fixed that problem.
Nice. And that's actually one of the few of his that I haven't seen still. I mean, I say few of his, like I've seen a lot, but yeah, it's on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. But Ikiru was always one that like would pop up on. I follow a lot of film pages, follow a lot of obviously Letterboxd, IMDb, like do all that. And it always was one of those that was in like the top, and a lot of people would talk about it being very moving. And obviously, it's always hard to tell a bit with film school. Again, films that I jokingly referring to as film school movies, which is ones that a lot of people love it. It's the 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's like it's stuff that has been hyped up so much that you're like, is it just like, was it significant for the time, but it hasn't aged? Does it like have all those things there? So Akira was one of those, though it wasn't like Seven Samurai or like some of these other of his that I had heard predominantly. So I was like, it was one of those, I even forgot it was Kurosawa. So it was a very cool thing to be able to find out that part. And yeah, so that was all I knew about it. But Nav, what about you?
Yeah, so like for me, the last 2 or 3 years have been like really locked into film, and Kurosawa is obviously one of those ones that you can't really start learning about films without diving into him a little bit. But I haven't seen that many of his films. Similar to you, I know the influences on Star Wars, like particularly from Rashomon, Hidden Fortress, and Seven Samurai, like those three. There's even Clone Wars Season 2, Episode 17 is dedicated to Akira Kurosawa. Like it's called Bounty Hunters. It's Star Wars and Kurosawa go hand in hand.
Seven Samurai.
Yeah, like if you are a Star Wars fan, you can't like not appreciate Kurosawa. That being said, I've been working slowly through his filmography, and I've gotten a couple. I watched Ran on the flight to LA this year, which was an experience. That was mental. It's wild that films from that age can still feel as big as they do now. Like something like that can feel much bigger than like, you know, the latest MCU film. You know, like it's insane. But Ikiru I hadn't seen. I nearly watched the Colonized remake that came out in 2022, but I actually avoided it because I wanted to watch Kurosawa's version first. And I was hoping to actually watch that this week so I could talk about both at the same time, but I didn't actually get around to the Bill Nighy version. So that's coming up for me next week. But yeah, like beyond knowing that it was by Kurosawa and that I was going to watch it eventually, I was really stoked when Zane threw it to me as an option because I was like, yes, that one. I want to see that. So
Absolutely.
It worked out perfectly. But Zane, for you, I'm curious, like, how did you find your way to this film for the first time? Nice.
I think, oh man, years ago at this point, but I honestly,
how long ago was it?
I mean, this movie is now 70-ish years old. I probably watched
you sort of
it.
Released. Nice, man. Nice.
Many people don't know that Zane is actually timeless.
Right. Honestly, I think, you know, you just, when you're going through kind of that dark period over the years, you're trying to figure out ways to kind of get through it. You just start looking for like various sources of inspiration and what have you. And I don't want to say other movies that maybe would have brought me down this path because I think we're saving that for a little bit later. But I will just say that, you know, I was looking for movies that I thought would give me perspective, and this is one of them that I came across. And sometimes you just happen to come across exactly what you need at the right time. And that was this movie for me.
And I'm curious as well, like, is this a film that you've seen like many times in your life?
I am by nature not someone that rewatches things over and over again. Outside of like A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, which I'll watch almost like annually, just because it's like a really nice comfort movie for me.
For sure.
I don't watch movies multiple times too often. I'd say Ikiru I've probably seen like 3 or 4 times at this point, but not like that often. Whereas like A Knight's Tale, I've probably seen it like 20, 30 times, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, awesome. I've got some fun facts together if you guys are interested in having some fun. Before we get into the meaning of life and existentialism. All right, so running at 143 minutes on a budget of $85,000, it brought in $62,000 at the box office. This is the 14th film by Akira Kurosawa, and it was released on the 9th of October, 1952, and it was considered by Kurosawa to be his greatest work. It did not win, nor was it nominated for any Academy Awards, though it won various other awards. Yeah. It is, however, currently the 97th highest ranked film on IMDb with an 8.3 out of 10, sitting 1 spot above Reservoir Dogs and 1 spot below 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's ranked 14th highest on Letterboxd, however, at a 4.5 out of 5, sitting 1 spot above Lord of the Rings: Return of the King and 1 spot below Schindler's List. I thought it was really interesting that 2 of those films have been on the podcast before. And this is the 3rd highest ranked film of Akira Kurosawa's filmography on Letterboxd. The film was co-written by Kurosawa, Shinobu Hashimoto, and Hideo Oguni, and stars Takashi Shimura as the main character. The screenplay was partly inspired by Leo Tolstoy's 1886 novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich. The original name for the film was actually The Death of Watanabe. But then Kurosawa changed the name to Ikiru, which one of the writers thought was really what's the word? What's that word when someone's like really like up themselves? It's too early in the day. Pretentious. Yeah, exactly. So one of the writers thought it was pretentious. The other one was like, it's perfect. So naturally they went with Ikiru.
Understood.
I think just given that Ikiru means literally to live, I think it's perfect.
I think it's
right?
apropos. Yeah.
Well, the film actually, when it made its debut on Western shores, came with the title Doomed. Just
Jesus.
If you're curious on how white people interpreted this film.
I gotta tell you, if the film name was Doomed, I probably would not have watched it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. The film has, however, been adapted a few times. So for the first time in 1971 for the Indian Hindi film Anand, and for the stage as a musical production in 2020 in Japan. In 2003, DreamWorks started works on an English language adaptation that would have starred Tom Hanks in the lead role with Jim Sheridan to direct, but it was never produced. It was, however, eventually adapted into the 2022 film Living, which stars Bill Nighy and was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Classic. The film tackles themes of existentialism, mortality, failing bureaucracy, and family life, and has been hailed as a timeless classic, living on in basically all of the films to watch before you die lists that you can find. The film critic Roger Ebert has said that over the years, I've seen it every 5 years or so, and each time it has moved me and made me think. The film features cinematography by Kurosawa's longtime collaborator, Asakazu Nakai, who shot some of the most iconic Kurosawa films, including Ran, Seven Samurai, Stray Dog, and High and Low, along with production design by another longtime collaborator, Takashi Matsuyama, who worked on some of those same films as well as Rashomon. And that's about all I could find on this film, even though it's like so beloved, there really isn't a lot of like info on it, you know? But if either of you have anything to add, now would be the time.
Nothing on my end. Zane, like, what do you think?
No, I think that's good.
Was it fun? Was it fun, guys?
I was about to ask if, on a scale of 1 to fun, I think this was fun. I think this was very fun.
Yeah, I was
especially when you were saying that there isn't a ton of stuff on this film. That you were saying that like it is very interesting where stuff sits. I also love on Letterboxd because I noticed this with IMDb. I love that on Letterboxd a lot more international films are ranked higher.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there is something with IMDb where it tends to be a lot of American Western centric films. It's really cool to see that Letterboxd is very international.
I think that also Letterboxd benefits from, because Letterboxd has its fair share of the pretentious like film crowd.
Oh, for sure.
However, I think that it does benefit from it a little bit because when you do look at, those lists and stuff and people's interpretation, it's very different, So you work through your Letterboxd top 250 versus your IMDb top 250. You're going to find a lot of stuff that may not be on the other side, which is really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. But yeah, before we get into actually talking about the film, Kate, do you want to take us through spoilers?
Of course, absolutely. Now, before we go any further, all these conversations are not spoiler free. We're not necessarily doing a play-by-play, but we are talking about the film with the expectation that you have already seen it.
Yes,
it's always cool to go back and watch the film and check back later, but make sure that you check back later. But even
we have abandonment issues.
If you haven't seen the film, we do have abandonment issues for reasons that we will discuss or make fun of in my case. But even if you haven't seen the film, chances are we'll convince you to finally make that leap. And if you want to know what film to watch in advance so you can come in prepared for next week, like the good little people you are, links are in the description below for all our socials, so you can check us out there. And if you listen all the way to the end of today's episode, we reward those with longer attention spans. We'll also be revealing our next film and guest right here. But without further ado, let's go, gentlemen. Let's talk about death.
Hell yeah, let's talk about death. I'm hyped. On the topic of death,
life more so.
A performance that A, killed me and B, gave me life is the main character in this film. The Watanabe is his name. And Kate, I know that this character really connected with you, and I wanted to maybe start with maybe some of your feelings on him, and then let's go from there. Use it as a springboard.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I want Zane's thoughts on this, because as we talked about a little bit off mic, this is one of those films that I truly feel, at least for me, I don't, Zane, you put it really elegantly it's one of those films that you don't really look at in a technical way, where it's not like it's not one of those films that, I'm analyzing every shot and being like, oh my God, how'd they do that? It's one of those films that you just feel. And it feels like it's kind of it's trying to tell you something. And it's like when you hear an analogy or you hear a story that's supposed to have a moral at the end. It's like, it's one of those kind of things. It harkens back to that sitting around a campfire feel of telling you a story that you're supposed to take something away from. And I feel like with this character of Watanabe, it's he's such an interesting character in how he does so much with so little, and especially when the Japanese style of acting can range from everything to being incredibly emotional to, but kind of having the character play it so understated is kind of, in my experience, and maybe this is just my whiteness talking, but like at the same time, I do think it's really interesting how different cultures present acting. And I think that his subtlety, like one of my favorite moments was him being like, wondering like there's not enough time for me to do this. And then all of a sudden you just see in his eyes him realize something and go, there is time. There is time. If I put my mind to it, I can actually do something. And he just goes on this giant journey that made me go, I understand why Bill Nighy was nominated for an Oscar for his performance of this character, because I'm like, this is a great character.
Absolutely.
But Zane, I'm curious about your experience with this character. Obviously, it's like we have some shared experience in this, in the wider spread of this film and what it's about. But what was it about this character that spoke to you?
Yeah, so I think when I look at this movie, I don't necessarily focus so much on the micro, but more on the macro of what the movie is and like the philosophy behind it and how people forget what life can be. But when I do look at the character, I think that he knocked it out of the park because in just a very subtle or maybe not so subtle if you're paying attention cues with like his eye movements, you can see the pain that he's feeling. You can see all the expression. It's all there. And I think that it's a very underrated act, the non-verbal acting. And it tells you so much if you are just willing to pay attention to what is happening. Because a lot of times you have these movies where you need that dialogue, right? Or like, even if it's a storybook, like if you look at Fire and Blood, right? George R. R. Martin, like it's really, that's a really tough read because there's no dialogue in it, right? And there are so many moments in Ikiru where there's no necessarily dialogue happening and you're just watching Watanabe. And you can gain so much and you can understand his expressions. And it starts from the very beginning when he's in the doctor's office and he knows like what's about to happen. And you can just see like when he glances away and he's like, oh shit. You know,
I love the other guy's reaction as well, where he's like realizing, oh God, yeah, this guy has that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Like that whole scene was just genius, and setting it up beforehand of being like, oh, you got a stomach cramp, like you got this whole thing, and it's like, oh yeah, if they tell you this, it means this. Like if they tell you that, like it's this.
I did think it was really interesting that so Kurosawa was talking about how there was also commentary on how the health system worked in Japan at the time, where they didn't tell him that he has stomach cancer. And that was quite common in Japan at the time because they felt that to tell someone that was a death sentence and they would stop living. And so they would just give them the, oh, you know, like, it's just an ulcer. You'll be fine. Have some medication. And they knew he was going to die from that moment. So some Western audiences, when they watched it, they were like,
based on.
Yeah. Some Western audiences were like, what the fuck? Like, why would they not tell him they're the doctors? And it's like, no. All like the Japanese audiences understood that this is something that happens.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And can you imagine being in that hospital where some random stranger comes up to you and is like, hey, by the way, if they tell you this, you're fucked. I would be like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like,
I'm going to start going to hospitals and doing that to people.
Shift of what's happening, right? Like,
it's
absolutely going out into hospitals, just chilling.
Just some little kid with a Band-Aid on his finger. I'm like,
person to come in.
Yeah, that little kid just has like a Band-Aid on his finger and he's just like, I have an owie. And I'm like, hey, guess what?
That might mean you have cancer, kid.
Yeah.
Good luck, pal. And then just walk out.
Enjoy.
Just ruin some kid's life.
Bad.
But yeah, no, I agree. It's like it's such an insane thing with this film where what I love about it and what I love about what they really try to pull off is you set up that scene. But the thing is, even as a Western audience, for me, I it's cool to know that was like actually like a practice at the time. Because I thought it was more akin to the, well, I guess not cool, but you know what I mean. It's more, it's different than how I was interpreting it, because I thought it was more akin to the public works thing, where it's like, we could tell him, but then that means we have to do something about it, sort of situation. Yeah. But if we don't, then we don't have to waste our resources on it. It's like for something that ultimately is going to kill him anyway, and we don't have a real reason as to how. Yeah. So I interpret it more as like a systematic issue, similar to how the public work stuff was. So it was kind of feeding into that theme, sure, that you are now betrayed by the various thing that you're actually a part of.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that to Zane's point also, that scene really emphasizes, as you had said before, Kate, how the acting is in this film in particular. Like, it is very, very, what's the word? Like, it's not subtle, right? Because the way that he's acting with his body feels like we were talking before, it was adapted to the stage for a musical. And I'm like, I could see, I would be able to read this guy from the pews, you know? Like, I'd be able to see exactly what he's feeling because his whole presence is, like, exists.
You feel
there. It's like up until... we'll get into kind of the structure of the film a little bit later, but like it's essentially the film takes place in two parts. And again, spoilers, guys, but like the first half of the film takes place with him realizing that he's going to die. And the second half of the film is essentially like he's gone. And it's people like talking about his life and the significance and a couple of little flashbacks. But if you think about how he acts in the flashbacks, particularly the last maybe two flashbacks, compared to how he is in the first half of the film, the entire presence of the character is very, very different.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the dialogue for the film... Go, Zane.
I think to the audience could have been a very jarring decision to have your protagonist just like with like an hour plus still to go.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, probably a very risky move to make. And so I think part of those things, and very you see that happen a bit more often now, right? And to the extent where you have some movies where the supposed main character is killed off right away. But that's why I say like just little things like that on how this movie was so far ahead of its time with a lot of the decision making that they made in the storytelling.
And I know I have a lot more to say on that later, like with it, because I think it's brilliant because it changes how even the story is told.
Exactly.
But now I'm curious to your thoughts.
No, so a really interesting thing for me is that when this happened, I'll tell you where my brain went to. My brain was, oh, he faked his death so he could just go and live his life. Because I was watching it and I was like, if this is me, you know, like if this was me that found this out, and I'm like, my first thing is I'm literally quitting my job. Like I'm out and I'm going to see my friends. I'm coming back to see you guys and spend time with you and then travel around and just see all the things that I need to see and then kick the bucket, you know? But that it's so astounding to me that the choice was like, I'm going to do like one good thing. I'm going to have one thing that exists beyond me and that stays and hopefully, you know, what's the word? Passes the test of time, and that could also have that flow-on effect that by the end of the film that everyone else is like, we're not gonna allow ourselves to be caught in that minority. We're gonna like live to like, what's the word? Like respect his life, and we want to live like that. It's you know, and after a few bottles of sake, as you can tell towards the end of the film, these guys are plastered. Which you don't kind of realize. They're all sitting there and like, okay, yep, thank you, and this person's coming, and then all of a sudden you got one dude crawling over to the other guy being like, bro, he was a good man.
Yeah, let me tell you something.
A good man. Yeah. Like I don't speak Japanese, but like he was slurring his Japanese. I could feel it.
Well, it was at some point, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, like, at some point, like, it did become glaringly obvious that, like, these guys are all doing the, hey, man, tomorrow morning we're gonna wake up at 5 a.m. We're gonna go to the gym. We're gonna get back into our lives, like, you know, incredible. And I got a lot to say on how the ending goes, because, like, right after that. But Zane, your thoughts?
Well, I was gonna segue directly into that, and I feel like, gosh, there's so much that you can say for this movie, but with regards to the ending, I thought, at least the way I interpreted it, was it didn't take long for them to fall right back into their old ways. And I think it's so damning in some ways, where you have this epiphany, but until you really come face to face with the fact of your own mortality, it's very hard to change someone. And when I look at this movie, I look at a couple of quotes from it. I think very early on, where he's having the conversation with the stranger, he says, "What have I been living for all these years?" And again, I'm going from subtitles, so I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but that's what we're basing this conversation off of.
2 hour knowledge of what it means. Yeah.
Right. And the stranger also will then come back to him and say, "We only realize how beautiful life is when we face death." And Naf and I were talking about this, and I said, gosh, I can't pull up the text right now, but I feel like there's that quote where it's there's 2 times when someone dies. One when they actually go into the ground, and then the second one when their name is said for the last time. So that's the common phrase, right? But to me, it's people. The way I look at life is you live twice in life. The first time when you're actually born, and the second when you realize that you are actually going to die at some point. Whatever it is that brings that epiphany to you, whether you've seen someone close to you that has died, whether like Watanabe, you learn that you have cancer and that you're terminal, you're going to die. But at some point when you actually come face to face with your mortality and you realize that, hey, at some point, I'm going to die at some point. And that's when your perspective shifts completely to what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
And what have I done so far with my life? And I think that to see that on the film, at least for me, when I first saw it, was such an eye opener, and like a real gut check, I would say.
Oh yeah.
I think the film has, the film has inspired so many more films that have come out now, that it's, as you said, this film is well ahead of its time, because now we have a lot more things. Obviously, the remake a couple of years ago that did really, really well when this didn't. Like we said before, it technically flopped at the box office. Its opening weekend made $2,000. That's it. If you think about that, it is not much at all. But it's one of those things where there are more and more films now that talk about these themes that weren't coming out at that time. So it's definitely something that's gone to inspire, and even the film has that legacy as kind of. I don't know what came before this that may have had that. And if you guys know as well, please let us know in the comments or in the chat, because I would love more old NAFCOR. Kurosawa.
I will say...
I got some that are going to for cinema a la carte later. But yeah.
I actually was not aware of Living until you guys mentioned it. And had I known that, I would have done a repeat of last year and brought 2 movies to you guys yet again. Which would have just, at that point, it just becomes my shtick that I'm always bringing you guys to.
Absolutely.
But hey, it is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. But going to what you were saying, Zane, I just wanted to hop in on this because I know we got a couple other topics and we'll be jumping around with them later. So this might come up, but I wanted to make sure I said it because as you said with the ending there, one thing that I found when my mom passed, and it was again, Zane, you and I have talked about without getting into details about our both of our experiences losing a parent early on, and how that really warps your worldview. Where it's again, hearing people say, "Oh, you got time." It's it's hard for us to be able to interpret that in any way, shape, or form as truth, because it's hey, man, you really don't know. You really don't know.
Yeah.
But I remember once when when my mom was passing, I remember the people that would come around and be like, "Oh my God, this person was incredible. Oh my God, this person was great in this." And in my head, it was one of the first times I kind of allowed myself to not be Pollyanna about life. And I remember having that moment of being like, "No, there are a couple of people here that this is a permanent mark on them. This is a permanent thing that they will be without this person." Then there's another tier that will very much miss this person, but it's not a permanent mark. It's something that will take them, it's something that when they think about this person, it will hurt, but they'll be able to move on. And then there are people where this is a 2-week affair for you,
right?
Where this is a, "Oh, I am sad. Oh, well," and kind of moving on. And it's you kind of see that within the public works group, and they illustrate it perfectly in just, it was only in even a couple lines, but just these shots of this guy being it's the bringing the sheets public works, after this guy had just been crying and committing, we're going to be like this guy. We're going to go with this whole thing. And it's like, no, they're back to their old bullshit. But then you have that one guy who stands up and is just insulted by what these guys just did.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, it's such, it speaks volumes of when people die, where there are people that realize, as you said, that life. And they realize what people are capable of, what you are able to do. And this guy who wasn't really involved with Watanabe at all throughout the film is like deeply moved and actually does seek change.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's what's beautiful about us, because there are people that, whether they were in someone's life for a long time, small time, it doesn't matter, that actually did impact them and they will change. And I think that that's kind of, as you're saying, like, that's when that person decided to like learn to live again. And I don't know, it moved me in that scene, that I was just like, I felt that frustration.
Yeah.
I have felt that pain of looking at somebody and somebody saying that stuff. And I don't know, like it really was effective.
Yeah, I know. I experienced it in the way that, because obviously not having the same relationship with grief that the two of you have. For me, what I felt was, for example, on the tail end of my like big holiday, you know, like I went for 2 months.
Yeah.
I had this like journey, this odyssey, you know, that was like absolutely like 2 of the best months of my entire life. And for me, it was the fear on the tail end of that I'd come home and fall back into the same thing. You know, it is that last week in New Zealand by myself in a little like camper van, driving around and going like, holy shit, like the growth that I've experienced in the last 2 months. Like I am a new man. I'm getting home. Life's going to be different. And then you get home and work is work again. And not everybody else had the same experience that you had for the last 2 months. You know, I went back to work not the next day, but like the next week or something. But just like walking to people and be like, oh, hey, Naf, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, like good.
I was gone.
I haven't seen you for. I was like, yeah, I was gone for 2 months. Like, oh yeah, cool. Like just visiting like the other stores. I'm like, no. Like I took 2 months of leave. I've been traveling the world, and they're like, oh, cool. Hey, can you help me with this? And it's like,
it is insane.
Yeah, like it's heartbreaking, you know.
It really is, and that's a great comparison to it, frankly.
Yeah, it is one of those. Like I said before, it feels like the young woman character in here that he kind of takes a like liking to, not really romantic liking, but like inspiration from, like his kind of views in that sense is kind of what I pictured myself as, you know. And then it's like, you know, this side of things that we do has the stuff that excites me, that I go, this is me making my little bunnies, you know, but this isn't something that we can do full time. I still need something that funds my day-to-day life, that funds my ability to go back and explore and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was like, that was how, like, for me, it was grieving travel NAF and coming back to Parks and Rec NAF. But I want to dive deep into some more of the themes and stuff as well, but just one thought I want to get out of the way before we keep going into there. When we're talking about not really finding much information, I really wanted to see what kind of camera this was shot on and what sort of film stock as well, because seeing this, it was one of the things that blew my mind when I started learning about like film in particular and why people shoot on film. And it was the realization that theoretically shooting on film has essentially like an unlimited resolution. And I don't mean that like directly as fact, right? But it is very, very high resolution. So for example, one of the great ways to connect this is when Star Wars moved digital, and Attack of the Clones is the first film shot on digital, and then Revenge of the Sith from there was one of the other early films shot on digital. These two films, at a certain point, I mean, maybe not so much now because of AI upscaling and that, but at a certain point, it's actually not going to be possible to upscale them anymore.
Upscale to the degree that we can,
But Phantom Menace will, and Empire Strikes Back will, and the sequels as well that are all shot on film will. You know, it's like, it's insane to me, and it goes to show, because I'm watching this on my 65-inch TV at home. It's not a huge TV, but it's a good TV, and I'm watching it in like 1080p. But this looks to me as good as watching Interstellar in IMAX with those, the full frame shots of Cillian Murphy staring into the screen in black and white. I'm like, this looks that good. It's insane, and I'm sure in the sort of technical side, what's the word? Oppenheimer probably looks better. But the shock to me that I'm watching this and I'm like, if this came out this year and you said Chris Nolan did it on IMAX 1570, I'd go, yeah, okay, cool. And like that aspect of it blew my mind. Just one of the little technical things that stood out to me.
Well, in your way of like, again, it's always that eternal debate between digital and film, and it's tough because I tend to be on the digital side of the debate, but mainly because I think the digital offers up a ton of new tools. But you are right, like the major limitation to digital is that it will be outdated at some point.
Yeah,
which is why you need to make sure that what's captured on digital is good regardless of resolution. But as you're saying, it's insane.
Yeah, no, I saw a video of someone talking about how often when we're kind of getting into film, most people will fall in love with actual like film and will want to shoot on film, and everyone's going, dude, like never do it early on. Like it's just gonna like impact you. It's like everything you do costs money, and digital is going to give you a better shot. It's going to give you all of that stuff, and all the extra money that you save, you'll be able to put towards a better actor. You'll be able to put towards better equipment, all that kind of stuff. So they go, whenever you're starting out, digital on everything. And the fact that you can shoot on your damn iPhone now is it's insane. And we see it. Like me and you were talking, Kay, when we started doing skits this year, and we kind of upped the production value a little bit. We both got our new phones and started shooting in 4K and like cinematic, and it's like, yeah, this looks really good.
It's insane. It's truly, and to your point, like, but going forward with that, like, unless there's anything else either of you want to add on the film side of things, the technical.
No, I was curious how, because like I know one of Zane's talking points was around like identity and how people kind of form their identity. And for me, like, while my job isn't my identity, it's a big part of my life. And it's one of the things that I think Watanabe in this film experiences. Like he's just that guy, and even that character talks to him about, you're like the mummy, like you're just there. But Zane, I was wondering if you could talk more around like identity as it pertains to this film.
Yeah, I think I would challenge you a little bit, Naf. Like
Sorry, my phone's telling me to wake up.
I don't look at my career as any way to define me. Naf has stayed at my house and doesn't have a fucking clue what I do for work. Because I don't talk about it. Because it has no bearing on who I am as a human. It pays the bills, and that is the end of it. And it's not to say that I don't enjoy what I do. Like, not that at all. It's just that, like, there are so many times where you meet someone for the first time at a park, at a party, whatever, and within the first 5 questions, it's, so what do you do for work? And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Like
it's interesting, ain't it?
And I don't know if that's an American thing or if it's a global thing. Like it definitely happens a lot in the States. I'd be very curious for your international listeners if they ever chime in. Like, is that globally? Because in the States, it is a huge thing. And I find it so annoying because if I'm meeting you for the first time, what does me asking you what you do for work tell me about you at all? Nothing, for the most part. I would probably gain so much more insight from, oh, like, what are your hobbies? Or, oh, like, what's the last place you traveled to? Or what's the last book you read? Like, any of those questions will tell me so much more about who you are as a person and if I'm going to get along with you and want to befriend you or not. So when I say the identity part and you say that, like, your work is a big part of who you are, I challenge that because I feel like I know Naf pretty fucking well and I don't give a damn what you do.
Well, no, that was what I was saying. Like my job isn't in any way part of my identity, but it's like, it's one of the things that I go, it obviously takes up so much of my life that
it's hard like, not for it to feel like it's at least part of your identity.
Sure.
Yeah. But I suppose, like I said, the day to day is like, I don't think of myself as as my job. But
sure.
What I did want to touch on was that.
And then last thing I'll point out is like you were talking about your trip earlier and how, you know, a coworker had approached you and all that stuff. And I think that like a lot of the times as you get older, finding friends, making friends, it can be difficult, right? And a lot of times you end up becoming friends with people that you work with because they become, to some extent, friendships of convenience. You see them all the time. I've joked with a coworker in the past that like, dude, we see each other more than our SOs do because we're spending 8 hours a day next to each other, blah, 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 like all this stuff, right? And so, but then once that changes and you're no longer seeing them all the time, do you stay friends? And sometimes you do if there's really substance to the friendship there, but a lot of times you just naturally fall away. And so I look at that as like, you know, I think that I am closer to you guys in the very short time span that I have known you over the course of my life, than people that I have worked with that I've spent much more hours next to, because those are friendships of convenience. And not to say that like the friendship isn't there, right? Like it's still a friendship, but there's just so much more of a deeper friendship when you have actual things that you connect on and can talk about that aren't work related. And I think that it is so important to me that I do not let my career define me in any way, right? Like when you look at Watanabe at the end and people are talking about like the person that he is, I feel like that last third or two-fifths of that movie or whatever, you're kind of peering into his soul a little bit in ways. And I think that like if people talked about me, if I were to die, like I would hope that they wouldn't say anything about my career or things that I've accomplished, but that they would say that I was a good brother or that I was a good husband or that I was a great uncle and things like that, right? To me, or a great friend, to me, those are so much more important than anything else. And when I look at Watanabe, I think that because he had so much other things in his life that he could not attribute things to, at the very end, the best thing that he could come up with was his legacy was this park that he left behind. And that is not a bad thing at all. But it's just, I have no idea what I have accomplished in the last 20, 30 years. At least I have this as I leave this world. And that is both a great sacrifice in some ways, but it's also really fucking sad.
Oh yeah. But to me, I'll like, not that I'll challenge that because I think that everything you said is absolutely correct. I know for myself, like when I look at this movie, and especially from that job point of view, I think it's also tough when you get into an artistic realm of things, like for lack of a better phrase, like with when people take their passions, right, and they make that their job, where it is a thing of like it is, you kind of lose that separation, right? Like because I agree with you guys, where it's like my day job, I'm like, what I love about it is I get to go do my work there, leave it all there, and then I get to go live my life. Like it just pays the bills. It's something I don't have to think about after I leave work. But I mean, Naf, at least like you and I, we aspire to be filmmakers. We aspire to do this stuff there. It's tough when you get into that realm of things and like now the thing that was your passion is now also the thing that is your work. Because it's why I think you see a lot of people in Hollywood get weird egos, and why it's more of a temptation to be fake, because there is less of that separation, because part of you has to be super authentic because that's how you make good art. But then the other parts of you have to deal with the politics, the business, the day-to-day bullshit of just working for a corporation. And it's tough. And it's like, with that there, but it's to your point, Zane, of I think that echoes more so towards Watanabe's desire to do something real, to do something genuine. Because I think there's a difference, right? There is the paper pushing, I'm just a cog in the machine, man. Like I'll send this person over to this person. I'll follow the politics. But then you see when he actually tries and how much joy that actually brings him. And that was actually an interesting part of the movie, because similar to Everything Everywhere All at Once, like there was a part of the movie where I thought I knew what the movie was trying to tell me, which was showing reinvigorate yourself, learn how to live again, which was more don't focus on the money of it all, focus on the joy, focus on the sincerity. But then this movie took a step further, which is what I love about like what Everything Everywhere does as well. But it's like what happened was, I love that the movie goes from doing exactly that of you got to follow this, you got to do this to be successful or to have joy in your life. But it's now, where can you put that joy?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where can you actually like use your life to mean something for others?
Yeah.
And it's like he realizes the part he has played in the machine of bureaucracy. I learned a quote when I was younger, and I think it's what I strive to live my life by, which is leave a place better than when you found it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, whether it's, to me, that's like, whether it's a small thing, whether that's people, whether that's a relationship, whether that's a job, even if you're there for a month, a week, strive to do your best to make the place better, not worse. Yeah. Now, you can't control factors, you can't control anything like that, but I feel like that's what he really brought out in this movie. And I'm curious to your guys' thoughts on that, because like I think that that's a very interesting dynamic, is when he actually believed and he actually did something with his whole heart and with passion. But that's also because he actually was living life while he was doing that.
Yeah.
Before, he had nothing outside of or inside. So he had no desire to seek anything else. And I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I want to talk to the 2 points, because I want to talk to yours and I want to talk to Zane's from before as well, because I think that particularly in, like, I think humans crave connection, and we spend our whole life craving that connection, and then learn all of the ways in which all the ways in which we abandon ourselves for the sake of connection. And then eventually you find these very real friendships, which, as Zane was saying before, like, I think of the two of you as two of like the most important people in my life. So to me, this isn't like TikTok, like people that we cross paths with. Like, I've flown across the world to go and spend time with the two of you and have the deepest, most beautiful conversations.
You've literally stayed in both of our houses.
Yeah, right. like if you guys are listening here and you don't know, like, these two are two of my best friends, like hands down, 100%. And
likewise,
it's one of those things where if I think about all the other friends that I have here, I've got like two other friends that are here that I met through work, but old jobs, and we stayed connected past that. And that's beautiful because, you know, our friendship expands beyond the realm of work. However, a lot of, like we were saying before, my current work, which takes up a lot of my time, the people that I'm close with in my current role, while like I love them a lot as well, and if you guys are listening, like I love you. However, a big part of that friendship is also the connection to work. And there's something so freeing about calling Kay and talking day-to-day and calling you or texting you, Zane, and talking about a day-to-day life, and you telling me about like your nieces and nephews and like life and the stuff you've got going on with your friends and, you know, like those kinds of things. And Kay, in the same sense, you know, the stuff you're working on and your partner and like all of those kinds of parts of your life, where sometimes with people, it feels often, hey, is the only thing we connect with like work? Like, are we friends outside of work, you know? I've done a lot of work more recently to try and expand those like kind of colleague type friendships, so they're not just a convenience but something real. And I've got you know, friends from work that I'm much closer with, and again, it's those people that like I'll pick you up and we'll go to the movies or whatever, and the conversation goes, how's work? Yeah, good. How's work? Yeah, good. Cool. Okay, let's talk about like life. And then we get into like I went into MIF with a colleague who's like one of my best friends as well, and if you're listening, I love you as well. And you know, like we saw each other every day for 2 weeks and watched like 20 films back to back together, and it's like we got into the depths of it, you know, and it was beautiful. So it's one of those things that it's so easy to get caught up in the convenience of those relationships. And I think it's important to put that effort in to try and expand kind of beyond that. But that was my thoughts related to your point before. And Kay, I had thoughts on yours as well, but ADHD is hurting me right now. Remind me a little bit of what you were talking about just before, and the point will come back. Or did you forget as well?
I feel hurt, but no. No, well, I mean, yes, but I'm talking about more the idea of living life with the whole heart, and the idea of if you're working in arts, and the arts is your job, and you have the passion, but also you have to deal with the bullshit.
I remember.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I came across a video last night, and it said it was John Bernthal on his podcast, The Real Ones, and it was with his brother, I believe, who as doctor, as one of his titles. So I believe he's a doctor of some kind. But he said something beautiful that really resonated with me, and it's he said, "Be the thermostat, not the thermometer." Like, don't go into the room, read the temperature, and go, I'm just reading the temperature. You walk into a room and everyone's complaining, and you start complaining as well. Thermometer. If you're the thermostat, you set the temperature in every room you walk into. You walk in and you bring the light, you bring the joy. And as you were talking about, like, you know, work and the kind of monotony of it, even if you're doing your dream job, that thought came up, that be the thermostat. Go into it and be like, even if this is the boring bureaucracy part, like, I can set the joy here. I can talk to. It's the conversation we've had before, Kay, around the I don't have to do it, I get to do it. That makes a huge difference in rewiring the brain a little bit. I just thought that was beautiful.
Oh yeah, Zane, go ahead. I do have something to add at the end of this, but it'll be in my transitions into the next topic. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I do want to clarify. There's a difference, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying what you do for work. There's that, you know, very, very well known quote of like, you know, if you love what you do, you'll never have worked for a day in your life, right? Like, I get that, but there's a very big difference between being a paper pusher, bureaucracy, working for someone else, and being a filmmaker and doing the stuff for yourself, doing what your passions are, right? Like, there's very different things. Like, I am sure there is a very clear difference in energy between when you guys are doing stuff for the pod versus your day-to-day jobs. Right?
Oh, of course.
I can think as far back as like a internship that I had in college, where at the end of my internship, my supervisor or whatever in the review to like for my units or whatever, they had written that like, Zane is a hard worker, but you will know when Zane is interested in a project and when he is not. And like fair, like totally, like like
my boss said that to me a month ago.
Like, and it's not that you're not gonna get like effort from me. Like, I'm gonna do the best that I can at whatever I do, but I'm gonna be a bit more excited about something if I'm really fucking into it, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see, like, even with my own content, right? Like, if I'm doing a Lego video, I know Naf knows this. Like, I hate doing review videos. It's why I try to stray away from them, because I'm like, my thoughts don't matter. Like, make up your own fucking mind if you like something or not.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
exactly.
what I mean? But when I look at a set in a different light, or maybe do a video essay that maybe someone hasn't touched on before, or look at things in a different way, that's exciting to me because now I'm offering a unique perspective, right? Yeah. And so I think that, like, again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with enjoying what you do, but just kind of keeping the main thing of like, what am I really doing this for? And I think back to, again, if I tie it back to the movie, like Watanabe looking at his service award and just being absolutely fucking disgusted by it at the end and being like, what does this even fucking mean? You know?
Yeah.
And then you have the people at the public works where they're like, oh, well, if he's not here in this many days, like, you know, maybe I'll be the chief. And like someone else saying, like, there's like some people that have to die before you get to the job. And it's just like the utter disgust that I feel looking at that. And it's like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is a man's life and death, and you don't have any clue what's going on with him. And it's not important at all.
Yeah.
What the job is. It's like
what he can do for you.
The life. Yeah. The life of a human is so much more important than just like, oh, he's never missed a day of work. Like, it just, it blows my mind when I look at the way people look at things like that.
Oh yeah, it's insane. And it's and to your point, Zane, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because it was the thing watching the movie, especially when he meets that guy at the bar, that I resonated with. And it even like kind of affirmed it finally helped me put words to something I've been thinking about for a while, which is, and I literally wrote down, isn't this the point of life? To learn how to live from others. And not so much like learn how to live like other people know more than us. It's that other people live such different lives than us. So we get to learn from, like, when I met Naf, and seeing him go on his journey, that encouraged me to go on my own. Like, I wasn't really asking much for myself, and learning more about my own joys and my own love. And learning how NAF approached life really helped me to expand. You and I talking about our experiences with grief and having that validated, but learning about your situation versus mine. It's like, it was a thing that has opened my eyes so much to the world. And I thought that they illustrated it beautifully. It's like, not everything that the guy in Watanabe did was Watanabe's cup of tea. Like, I'm sure he wouldn't necessarily want to go back to the brothel or things there. Like, I'm not sure that he kind of wants to go to the, I mean, hey, listen, I don't speak to his wants and desires, and maybe that was me projecting, but nonetheless, it's the
on my bucket list.
Hey, fair. But the thing that I really thought was great about all of those scenes was how much he was open to it all, and how it is that, you know, like Naf and I, when we're going to Vegas, Naf would constantly be getting me to get outside of my autistic little comfort shell. And it was, and I don't regret any of it. Like, I look back and I am so excited with all the stuff that we did. And honestly, I can't wait until we go on another journey like it, because I
want to go to Vegas with Zane.
Oh, that would be insane. Listen, the three of us take on Vegas. That would be
one with the Vegas, baby. Let's go.
One with the strip.
Yeah. And that's, of course, not to say I didn't have a fucking brilliant time in Vegas with UK. Like, just FYI.
Oh, listen, I absolutely, like, I take that as a given. And but
Marley's in chat as well. Marley said he'll go to Vegas with us as well. Let's go.
We'll make it a one with the film strip. Everybody come on out.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing, learning how to live from others. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, where whether people in your life that helped you do that, or things in the film that kind of echoed that. Yeah. I'm curious.
Zane, if you want to go first, I do have some thoughts, but I can come back to it.
I mean, I don't. Yes and no. It's kind of complicated, right? Like, I don't look at myself as someone that is a partier by any means. I can have a good time, but I don't need to be, you know, the way that he put it in the movie, I thought was so fascinating, because, you know, he said he's never had a drink in his life, and now that he's dying, like, now he wants to try it, right? And I don't necessarily look at life that way. If I were to die tomorrow, and I think we'll get into this when we go into the a la carte part. If I were to die tomorrow, which is certainly a possibility, because nothing is ever promised, right? You just don't know. I feel healthy today, but I could not wake up tomorrow. That is a there's a chance that happens, because that is
unfortunately
life.
It's an empirical fact,
right?
Like,
because you just never know, right? But if I were to die tomorrow, like, I would feel sad for my loved ones, but I will feel that I have lived a relatively fulfilled life, right? And I would not feel like, oh, there's so many things that I wish I had done, right? I would feel that, like, I have lived a pretty accomplished life, which is the opposite of what we can say for our protagonist in this movie. So I don't look at this movie as it taught me how to live in any way, shape, or form. No, because, like, I know who I am, and I'm happy with who I am. But what it did teach me was to be very cognizant of that. And that if there will be days where you're not happy with things, and you need to recognize that ASAP, so that there aren't a string of days where you're feeling that way, because then it becomes a domino effect, an avalanche. And then you start getting into where he is, where you were thinking, what have I done with all these years?
Yeah.
And I don't feel that way about my life.
That's beautiful. Naf, Ancient, before you go on to your part, any chance I could jump in on that real quick? Because so when you were saying that, Zane, that really did echo something for me, which is very relevant in my life right now, which was, you know, there was a point in my life in college and things like that where I was making films left and right. I was writing, I was doing all this stuff. Arguably, I was some of the most successful I've ever been, like, quote unquote, so, you know, successful. And I look back at that time now, and I was lonely and depressed.
Yeah.
And because I started to overlap my work and my relationships too much, that I thought everybody I worked with was my friend, and everything I was doing was that. And instead of realizing that you might be working with your friends, absolutely, but there are people that you are just working with, and those relationships don't go as far as you think they do. But now I have learned more about myself and put more focus on where am I putting my time? Where am I putting my effort? What am I falling in love with? What am I actually working on doing? And that has led me back to all of my passions, whether it's filmmaking, writing, acting, everything. It's led me back here, but not so much in a way of, oh my God, well, now I finally have to get back to doing what I want to do. It's actually made me want to do those things with a different kind of fervor, because I'm like, oh, I'm not just telling a story to get a job.
Yeah.
I'm now telling a story because I can't not tell the story. And that's sort of what I feel with like what you were saying, which is like, if I were to die tomorrow, I feel I'm at a point where I'm like, I think I said to my sister at some point, I was like, I'm happy. Not all the time, but I'm actually happy. And it's like, I haven't always been able to say that in my life. And so a part of me like looks at that and it's like, for whatever days I have going forward, I want to live this way. I may not be content every single day of my life, and I might even have a string of bad days, but it's, as you're saying, where it's like, try to tackle those problems and try not to let them fester. Try to figure out what's going on so you can continue to actually enjoy your life and not get caught up in either the micro or the macro.
Yeah.
Just get caught up in the moment. And sometimes you need to look at the macro, not to get obsessed with the micro. Sometimes you need to do the opposite. And it's like, I've learned that is an inherent part of my mental health journey. And I don't know, just you saying that made me think about all that. But Naf, I'm curious, not just your thoughts on that, but I'm sure there's other thoughts you have as well.
No, but one of the things that was coming up before was the concept that like you are who you surround yourself with. And if you are surrounded by exclusively, like we said, those kind of work relationships, and it's with people that want to complain about work, it's like you're all going to sit there and do the same thing. And with Watanabe, I think he experiences that a little bit, where it's like, it's just like, not that they're friends outside of work or anything, but all that he does is go to work, and everyone's complaining about how shitty it is, the bureaucracy of everything, and then goes home and then comes back. And it's like, you can understand how it kind of like weighs on you, And I think that to our previous points, I think that's one of the things that I find so beautiful about the relationships I have with you guys, and of course some of the other people that I've met, is that it, to your earlier point, Kay, in terms of teaching or learning how to live from other people, it's like you take aspects, like there's so much stuff that I've learned from Zane that is part of my daily life now, stuff that I've learned from you and stuff that I've learned from the other people that I've gone and experienced life with that are so important and integral to like who I am now, which like wasn't beforehand, And of course, like we said before, it's still like obviously so much to learn, and I'm still like, I find that I have a decent level of like contentment, but I find that I'm still on that journey a little bit of going like, I'm very forward focused. I'm going, I'll be happy when I'm here. I'll be happy when I'm there. And that is constantly chasing the cat. Give me one sec. Okay, I think it's back now.
Hold up, yeah.
There we go.
But yeah, I was just saying that, you are the people that you kind of surround yourself with. And Zane, you wanted to talk a little bit on a particular philosophy there?
Yeah, so it's you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And so if, just like you said, like if there's people around you that are constantly complaining about stuff, like it's probably gonna happen to you too, right? And,
you will complain.
Right. And like when I talk about, I think that perspective is so important. I can think of like in my earlier 20s, like there was a year where I went to Vegas like 6 times. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why am I spending like, and each time you go to Vegas, like it's a pretty expensive trip, right? It adds up. And I think at that point I decided that this was, if that's what you enjoy, like great, kudos to you. But to me, I felt like I was missing out on stuff. And that's when I really started becoming more global and like traveling a lot more. And I think that opened my eyes to so many different cultures, and it made me a much better, well-rounded person than I was at the time. And I think that it's so important to be able to pivot and recognize where your gaps are. Similar to, again, what Watanabe did, right? He realized where he was fading away, and obviously he needed an earth-shattering event to happen for him to realize that. But at the end of the day, better late than never.
I think It's so telling that for so many people, it comes in exactly this way. Like it's that
Oh,
moment.
yeah.
It's something happening like directly like with you or to you that wakes you up to that like change that's needed. Yeah, but
Well, and
go ahead, Kay.
yeah, like, well, and going with even like what I mentioned the third act earlier, and to go into that aspect of it, what I think is so interesting with what you were saying, Neff, is like the third act does a great job of, they tell you he dies, and then you look at the time code, and as you guys said, it's like an hour still left of this movie, and you're like, well, what the fuck can happen in this hour? And it's, again, it's almost like the Rashomon style, where it's like, you know, what I think is so interesting, and I think why this movie endures, is if we were to see all of the rest of this movie from his perspective, I think that it wouldn't last as much. Because I think that what I love about it is we're learning how all of these different people interpret his actions. And it's kind of, as you said, Zane, about like, no, like, you know, a man dies twice, like that vibe there of like, you're still living on in these people's thoughts, but it's a weird combo because you have a lot of people who found his actions annoying, and not necessarily annoying, but as they kind of reveal, it's almost like they can't allow that within themselves. So they'd rather, it's kind of like that great Teddy Roosevelt quote of, like, great is the man who enters the arena, not the one who sits from the sidelines, where it's easy to jeer, it's easy to make fun of people. But what I love about what this film shows is how everybody still talks about what he did. And we now see it, but we will never have an actual answer as to why he did the things. But your interpretation of his stuff might be different from mine. Naf, your interpretation like is going to be different from mine. It's like, I think that leaves the film open to still being iconic and still being worth talking about to this day, is because he didn't answer all your questions. He didn't tell you exactly why. And what I love is they even just kind of have this whole thing of like, we're telling you kind of what happened in the weirdest way possible, like a little out of order, a little out of chronology, and again, very ahead of its time, as you were talking about, like towards the top, Zane. And then within it, we even have one of the best lines that the film drops, which is, I don't have the time. I can't afford to hate.
Yeah, I don't have
I don't have enough time. I can't afford it. And
it's a beautiful,
I love that line. And I know you wanted to talk about that, Naf, and Zane, I don't know if you have more thoughts on all of that, like as we're kind of starting to wrap up here.
Go ahead, Naf.
It was just that line that resonated with me so much, you know, like it's funny that for me, I go, there isn't even much that I have to go, like, it's that deep, you know? I heard the line, and it was one of those things that I heard it, and I wrote it down straight away. I was just like, yeah.
Same.
Yeah, because it's like, you can look at it from the perspective of, I've got 6 months left, and so, like, I don't have that kind of time, but it's also, like, in real life, like, I may die tomorrow. Like you said before, anything could happen, you know? And so it's like, with that in mind, even whether it's I've got 40 years left, or I've got 40 days left, or 40 minutes left, it's like, do you have that kind of time to spend on that? Do you want to give that percentage of the limited time that you have here towards that kind of energy? You know, that's where it stood out to me the most.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that too, because it is exhausting. Hate is exhausting. Yeah, and it takes up every minute of your everyday when you feel that pain, and it's just such a big burden to carry around. And like, there are even family members that, like, because I also had I had a whole Catholic stage in my life where I really believed in, you know, forgiveness, but at the same time, because of that, I don't think I was putting up my boundaries as much as I should have. And it was a thing of where I've had to reconcile with that feeling that I genuinely believe is the right way to go about life, which is that sense of forgiveness and move on. Because it's like, ultimately, it's like, the more you hate, it's just what it's going to do to affect you. And I think it ultimately comes down to finding that balance of it all. Like, you can not like people, you can disagree with people, you don't have to talk to everybody in a while. But it's why we created this podcast. It's this idea of, I'd rather talk about things that people love and learn why they love them, rather than talk about things I hate or talk about things I didn't like.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather learn and rather share in love than shit on stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have a lot more to add there. I suppose what I would challenge you guys on is with the idea of I don't have that much time. And it would be, and you have to answer this on the pod. You can just be internalize it if you want. But if you knew that you had limited time, what are things that you would do differently? And I say differently instead of what are things that you want to do, because obviously if you knew that you had finite time left to live, like Nav said, quit your job, fucking go travel, whatever. Like, exactly. And those things are not as realistic on a day-to-day basis, right? But just it makes you think of like, what are things that I'm not doing now that I really should be doing that would make my value of life better? And however you interpret that. And you can internalize that and we can talk about it ourselves. If you want to talk about it on the pod, you can.
Well, listeners, put down in the comments below. But no, it is a good question to think about, and I think it speaks. I know that obviously, I think like half jokingly, we've talked more about ourselves rather than this film, this entire podcast. However, I think that there are just films that bring that out.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that that was the point of this movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was not so much the craft, not so much the technicality of it. It makes you think about.
It makes you think about your life. Yes.
Yes. That's why, like, you know, the title of the video on YouTube is like, Ikiru will change your life. And so many people, like I said before, it's all of those lists of films to watch before you die. Like, it's informed how people live. And as we said, the title is to live. And I think that perfectly encapsulates that. And when we talk about what we do here, it's bringing to light the films that matter to people most and why. And I think that's perfectly indicative of the conversation we had. So, like, thank you, Zane, for bringing this film, dude.
I think the earlier in life you watch the film, the more you will gain from it.
Yeah. Don't wait until your last days to watch this movie. Like, watch it now, enjoy it, learn from it. And honestly, again, just be mindful. Live with intention.
Live with intent. Live with intent. Yep, exactly.
Live with intent. But yes, be mindful. Be very demure. So should we move on to cinema a la carte, guys?
Yeah, I'm happy. Nobody has anything else they want to add?
I mean, I could talk about this film for hours, but we do not have that kind of time.
Yeah, right. Sweet. Well, let's move over to cinema a la carte then.
Absolutely. Well, as always, we like to wrap up with a little game of cinema a la carte. As a reminder, this is where we really get to show you the best way to experience this film through the metaphor, of course, of food. Now, we have each prepared a menu of our own with this week's film as the main course, along with an entree, or if you're in America, it's an appetizer to start, a wine to pair, and a dessert to complete your journey. And you get to decide which of our set menus you love the most. Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and let us know if you guys would pair anything with this film.
Hell yeah.
Now, we're going to start off with
Zane.
Naf. What's in third place, baby? Oh, that's right. Zane wanted to go first because he gave a shit for it at the beginning of the pod. So, Zane.
Okay. I don't know that mine are ranked in specific ways, but I'm taking this one first before Nav gets to, and it is Sometimes I Think About Dying with Daisy Ridley.
Oh.
Yeah. So would you set this as your like your entree? Like, this is your little tease to get in?
Ooh. You know what? I think I'm going to have a very jarring entree. So I will put this as the wine.
Okay.
And the entree will be a very, like, I don't know if a lot of people will like this, but certain people will.
Hit me.
And so I'm going to keep the entree as a little bit different, but I'll use this as the wine.
Okay, what's the entree then?
Oh, am I just doing all three at once?
All three, baby.
All three at once.
Okay, all right. The entree will be Saw, the horror movie.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Because it is a very different interpretation of the same message in my mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that it actually pairs very well from the right perspective. But I also recognize that horror movies are not for everyone. And for some people, they'll just be like, nah, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But for me, when I contrast the two, I'm like, yeah, I see it. I get it. And then for dessert, I'm going to go completely out of the box. And I'm going to go with the commencement speech delivered by Steve Jobs in 2005.
Oh, shit.
At Stanford University.
Okay.
And in that one, he tells a couple of stories of his life, some of them about identity and being fired from his own company, and having the identity crisis of how the fuck did I get fired from my own company? And then two, also about death. And he syncs the two of them up completely. And so I think all three of those, it's a very similar but different way to look at the same message.
Yeah.
And if you watch all of them, you can see how all these things will shape your life, all for the better, in my opinion.
That's beautiful. I love it.
And what year was that one for? Like, or what was the commencement speech for? Like, which university?
Steve Jobs, Stanford, 2005.
Stanford. Got it.
Beautiful. Okay, so give it back to me one more time. So just from the top, you got your entree.
So the wine was Sometimes I Think About Dying, Daisy Ridley.
Yep.
Entree was Saw. I mean, literally any of them, but you could say the whole franchise if you want. Or the first one, just because it was the first one. And then the dessert is Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford.
And of course, your main is Ikiru. And if you had to like name your set menu, what would you call it?
Sometimes I Think About Dying.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Okay. I like it.
Let me come back to you with the name for the menu. Let me come back to you with the name for the menu.
Beautiful. Okay.
Crafting the menu was tough.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, my set menu's title is You're Gonna Die, right? And that comes out to, and I want to start first with an honorable mention that didn't make my list. And also Sometimes I Think About Dying was one of the films that this brought to, but it actually isn't on my cinema a la carte. However, I think one of the key themes of this film is living with intent. It's like you can get caught up in the day-to-day of how much your job sucks and your life sucks and everything brings you down, and when you start to live your life with intent, even that kind of one last moment can linger and live on and leave a legacy. And I think that a film that talks to this incredibly well is Luke Skywalker's arc in The Last Jedi. It's very, very similar. And so I wanted to honorable mention that, even though it's not on my cinema a la carte. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a film that Marley actually mentioned in chat earlier, but I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to spoil it. So this is Perfect Days that came out last year. It was like number 10 on my list. It's actually, I think, Zane, you'd really like it. It's very much in that Sometimes I Think About Dying Ikiru state. So like direct recommendation for you is Perfect Days if you haven't seen it.
Writing it down.
Then we go to Ikiru as our main, and we're going to pair that with a film that I got to watch at MIF this year, which is currently or just about to start screening in the California area, and it's My Old Ass. It's starring Aubrey Plaza, and it's very much got to do with, like, I think that all of my films kind of deal with we know the outcome and we're doing it anyway. And I think Ikiru is one of those that, he knew, but he didn't know. And then he learned very quickly what the outcome was going to be. And he's like, I'm going to do something anyway. I'm not just going to give up and die. And Perfect Days is a bit like that too. It's just kind of enjoying the moment for the moment. For dessert, I've got one that I'm really happy with. And this is the animated film Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which has the embodiment of death in the form of Pablo Escobar the wolf. And, this is it's very much very similar. It's, I've died, haha. Hey, you're on your last life. So what are you going to do with it? None of your life has mattered up until now. You have like toyed with death 8 out of 9 times. This is it. And when that 9th time comes and death is knocking at the door, what does he do? He runs away. And he reverts to his original self, and he becomes a house cat. And it takes that moment to rip him out. I don't know if either of you have seen this movie, but it is much deeper than people give it credit for. I believe it's streaming on Netflix.
Everybody talks about it. Like, It's one of those things where I do have to sit down and actually watch it, because I tried to watch it on a plane and I was like, I know this film will hit because a lot of my friends have loved this movie. Mm-hmm. I just need to be in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, exactly. So my list is as we said, it's called You Know You're Gonna Die, right? And we start with Perfect Days as your entree. We go to our main Ikiru paired with a beautiful wine of my old ass, and then we have a beautiful dessert and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
I have my menu name.
Ooh, gimme.
Perfect. Tell us what's second place.
It is a taste of perspective.
Yum.
Ooh,
I like it.
Shit, that's good. That's good. That's a good one there.
Kay. Beat that.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to introduce my menu, which is called Have a Slice of Life. And I have
worst name.
Started you off with something very sweet. So an appetizer that's really going to open up the palate. It may be a bit misleading for the rest of the meal. However, it is something that I think is when you understand the deeper meaning behind it and you get some of the aftertaste in there, it's really going to actually make a lot of sense, which is Mary Poppins. Starting off with this idea of learning how the film is not actually about the kids, it's about the dad, learning how to be involved with his family again, and learning how to enjoy the little things in life, whether it's being a chimney sweep up on a roof, being the only people that get to see the view, whether it's being a busker on the street, whether it's enjoying the world of imagination, learning how to be silly and learning how to love life and to look out for those around us. A beautiful, enriching tale. And then obviously the main being Ikiru, going into that state of like having a nice hearty dish that really makes you think about the world. But I'm pairing that with the wine with another international film of Cinema Paradiso, of having this whole story about a little town's, I believe it's in Sicily, a little town's movie theater. And it's when this kid, now grown up, hears that the old projectionist of this theater has passed on. And it's him reflecting on all the times when he used to work for that theater. And it's one of the most brilliant displays of how to tell a giant story within a small means, where you see people that are going on first dates in the theater, and then a couple of scenes later, they are now with a kid together. And it's like, it's like little ways of telling a story that's incredibly rich, pairs well with this movie with in terms of time, in terms of like kind of the eccentric nature of life. And then ends with this incredibly beautiful montage that they improved on in The Good Place. But dessert is Drive My Car, because I think Drive My Car is one of the most enriching films. And also it's at 3 hours long. There's a lot of meal for you to take over, and there's a lot of leftovers you're going to bring home, and you're going to be able to enjoy this meal as it continues to go on through the night. But truly one of the deepest movies I've seen in a very long time, as a film that slowly hits you as this goes on. And then you're just, it's one of the best screenplays, especially that year. It was absolutely one of the best. And it deeply moves me. So for my slice of life, it's going to be Mary Poppins as an appetizer. Main is Ikiru. The wine is going to be Cinema Paradiso, and dessert is going to be Drive My Car.
Amazing. And you guys can let us know in the comments which of those you like the most as well. Feel free to say mine, because it is the best. But moving on, thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you for everyone who joined us in chat today and just in the live stream, whether you were chatting or not. We always love having you. And thank you for listening if you're listening on the old on demand as well. So I'm Naf. You can find me at Seen by Naf across all of the social platforms. What about you, Kay? Who are you?
Absolutely. I'm Movie K-Man the Third. I'm Movie Man Opinions, and you can find me absolutely anywhere. And Zane, thank you for joining us today. Where can people find you?
I am on YouTube, Twitter very occasionally, and TikTok very occasionally. Content on YouTube will be picking up shortly. I do a lot of Lego stuff. And yeah, you can find me as My Two Credits anywhere. My last plug will be not for me, but if you are physically capable and healthy, consider donating blood. You might save a life.
Beautiful.
If you have a bank near you, they are always looking. They are vampires. They will tell you that themselves. because once they get you once, they will ask for it repeatedly. But know that you are doing a good thing if you can. So
beautiful. Okay, awesome. And as a reminder, you guys can find all the links to our individual pages in the description below. There's even a Google form you can fill out. So if you have a specific creator you'd love to see or a specific film you'd love to see, and you can find One with the Films on Instagram, TikTok, and all your favorite podcasting platforms. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, guys. And as promised, you can feast your eyes on the next film on the weekly watch list. We'll see you next time.
All right. It's me, Darth Chaco. I talk about Star Wars and just all kinds of geek stuff. Anyways, the guys asked me to come by so I can announce the next film and guest. And yeah, let's get into it. Envelope, please. All right. So the next film on the list is going to be Primer. And the next guest is... oh, shit. It's me. I'll see you guys soon.